The following program contains inconvenient truth and controversial topics that may be offensive to some audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Radio from the heart of America now.
Welcome back. We're at the top of the second hour of Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
And folks, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Freedom Friday. This is Brandon Gallups hosting today. What an honor to be here and be hosting for my father today as he's out traveling and doing some television and radio and some preaching and teaching in a whole other part of the country. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And I was just listening to that intro and how appropriate for my next guest, controversial topics. And so I am getting ready to bring on, I teased you with this earlier as you were joining us. My next guest is going to be Mr. L.A. Marzulli. And L.A. is an author, a lecturer, a filmmaker. He has authored 12 books, including the Nephilim Trilogy, which made the CBA bestsellers list. He's got an honorary doctorate degree from his mentor, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, the provost at Pacific International University. He was honored with the Gold Medallion Award from Chuck Mishler at the K-House Conference in 2014. He has produced he's a film producer, 11 installments in the series The Watchers, 7. UFO Physical Evidence. It won UFO Best Film and People's Choice Awards at the UFO Congress in 2014. And I could just keep going on and on and on. But more importantly than any of that, L.A. Marzulli has become a dear friend of mine. I love getting to see him at Hear the Watchman conferences and other places. I love giving him a hard time every time that I see him. And I will continue to do that live on radio today. L.A., I love you, brother, and thank you for coming on with me today.
Hey, Brandon, we always have a great time when we see each other live, and it's just good to be on the show. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And listen, we would be doing a great injustice if we didn't spend a few minutes and encourage people to make their way to Long Island, New York, August the 9th through the 11th, for the next Hear the Watchman conference, where, of course, you will be speaking. My dad will be speaking, Russ Dizdar, Casper McLeod, Paul Begley, Dr. Michael, and others. I don't have the list sitting right in front of me, but it will be an awesome event, and look forward to, of course, seeing you there and listening to the latest information that you'll be bringing to the table.
It's always good to be here, the Watchman. It's great because it's a mixed bag. We got speakers that have completely different views on eschatology, which is great. And we all get along, and nobody's banging everybody over the head. So it's fantastic. I love it.
No, it is.
Let's face it. Nobody's got 100% of this thing 100% down. Nobody knows. We all see through that glass darkly, and you go back 150 years ago, no one would have imagined Israel returning to the homeland, even though it's there. We look at it now as like, wow, it's an afterthought. But you go back 150 years ago, and that was it was prophecy, and it was there, but a lot of people didn't believe it. So, we see through the glass darkly. We might not all agree on everything, but the one thing we do agree on is that Jesus is the King and our Lord and Savior, and that's what brings us together, and that's what's so unique about Hear the Watchman, because you have all these different speakers with slightly different views, and yet we all come together, and it's just a great weekend. And I can't admonish people enough if you're in the area to try to make it to that conference, because there's not a lot of stuff on the East Coast anyway. So if you're at all in that tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Boston, the Northeast, make your way down to Long Island and check it out.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll back that up. It's interesting, L.A., what you just said about, the differences in the teachings and opinions and all that, but we all center on Jesus, of course, and who he is and what he did and our salvation through him. And I said earlier with Mike Kerr, I said, my favorite thing about Hear the Watchman is that to listen to all the different speakers. I mean, you are very unique in what you teach and what you study. There may be others out there that are doing it, to my knowledge, not at the level that you are, and of course not with the Christ-centered message that you bring. But it's interesting how you'll sit in this conference for 3 days and, 15, 20 different speakers. all coming from different parts of the country, different walks of life, presenting a different message centered around the gospel. But every one of the messages throughout the weekend will absolutely tie together and play off of each other. And, of course, none of that is planned. That's the Holy Spirit at work.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it is also amazing how, for instance, my particular area of ministry is addiction and ministering to people coming out of addiction. But as you and I know from our conversations and our individual research, my area of ministry ties in directly with yours. And yet we study two totally different things and are trying to minister to people in those individual areas. But, addiction and drug use plays often hand in hand with the areas of expertise that you have in the UFOs and these manifestations of other beings and communication with the other side, if you will. I mean, I counsel with people about it every single day. So being in conference with you and listening to your studies and your knowledge has helped me in my counseling and my ministry, and I thank you for that.
Wow. Well, I appreciate the, basically glory to the King.
Absolutely. All glory goes to God. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, I was listening to the intro music there and the introduction and controversial topics, and so here we go. Two guys here, two ministers and two believers, and we're getting ready to talk about UFOs and aliens and all of this stuff that one of the most interesting things that I have seen you do now in a couple of different conferences is, for instance, in Dallas, close to 900 people there in a room, 900, 1,000 people, most of which I would assume are probably believers. That's why they're there. And you ask this question: how many people in this room, show of hands, have had a UFO experience, a alien experience, abduction experience, sleep paralysis, and you give all of these different examples that we would, associate with some type of alien, and I'm using that word loosely, encounter. And it's wild. 1/3 to 1/2 of the hands in the room will go up. And it's amazing because then you so brilliantly make the point that these people have nowhere to go to talk about this because most of them, if they were to go to their local pastor, would be laughed out of the room or voted out of the church.
Well, this is what we hear. I mean, I've got a stack of emails from people. I'm actually working on a new book on UFOs, which will be out in the fall, hopefully with some sort of interesting information in it, some new information, new insights, because we've already had disclosure, which happened in December, and it's ongoing. That's why the announcement from NASA is just a joke. That was my blog this morning. But, you're right. And it's alarming that 1/3 to even upwards to 50% of the people in the audience have had an encounter, and yet the church refuses to talk about it. It really isn't interested in it. Well, that's the woo-woo stuff. But it's not. It's not at all. And these people, I've got a stack of emails from people who basically just state, LA, I had this experience. I have nowhere to go. I had people tell me things that they've never told anybody else at every single conference I go to. People come up, and oftentimes they're with their husband or wife, and one of them will say, I haven't even told my husband this, and they'll launch into a story, or vice versa. The husband will say, well, I've never told anybody this, and the wife is like looking at him like, you've never shared this with me? I'll tell you a story. When I was at the Branson conference last year, this family came up, and this woman was needing counseling because the Greys were trying to abduct her like once or twice a week, and she kept fighting them off with the name of Jesus. And she was getting success, but she was weary about it, and her husband was just kind of sloughing it off like nothing was happening, all right, and didn't believe her. Meanwhile, the daughter was satanically, ritualistically abused.
Of course.
So that goes hand in hand in the whole thing.
Yes.
And she's manifesting. I looked at her, and I just went, oh, boy, we got a real live one here. And she needed help. Well, get this. So they leave. The family leaves. I prayed for them. And I said, you guys need to get counseling at a local church and start working through this. The husband comes back to me the next day and tells me he's been abducted since he was a kid.
Mm.
So
Wow.
here we go. He's like dissing his wife and saying, well, that's not happening. You're crazy, right?
Yeah.
And he's a lifelong abductee.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I said, you've got to tell your wife immediately. And whether or not that happened or not, I have no idea. That's just a microcosm of what we get. Even in Israel, there was someone that came up to me and relayed a story which is extremely troubling, and I'll talk about it at some later point. But this is why I made the film UFOs Are Real. In their own words, UFOs are real. It's called, the overarching title is The Watchmen Chronicles, and the first film was, in their own words, UFOs are real. Everybody in the film is a born-again spiritual Christian, and they come on camera telling us what they've experienced. Yeah. Everything from orbs that pace cars, UFO brain fog, where one woman goes, they're in a car trying to get away from a UFO, a pack full of girls, they're freaked out, and this woman is telling her sister, go faster, and this is what she says, we were speeding, but we weren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Yeah.
So everything from that to encounters with hybrids, missing time, cars being abducted with the driver in them, the whole gamut. And that's what the film talks about. And of course, at the end of the film, I just said, look, this is the coming great deception. This is why, Christians need to understand and know what's going on with the whole UFO phenomenon. Because if they don't, things are happening which are very alarming.
Yeah.
And the pace is picking up.
Yeah. L.A., listen, we're going to have to take a break, but when we come back, you've let out a couple of terms that may be confusing to people. You've talked about the grays, you've talked about abductions, and then just UFOs in general. Let's take a few minutes and just explain to people what you mean by that and what exactly we're talking about, because reality is, brother, as we know, most people are not hearing about this in a biblical context. So let's break that down on the other side of this break. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right. Folks, with us, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Buckle up. The ride ain't over yet. Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome back. And not only is the ride not over, it's just getting started. So I'm going to get right back to to my guest, my dear friend L.A. Marzulli. And L.A., before we went to break, brother, in that segment there, you used some terms that some people may just be unfamiliar with, and honestly probably make some people feel uncomfortable. And so, you said some things like the grays, and you talked about abductions, and even UFOs, and I just want to say from my perspective, and I'll let you speak for yourself, every bit of this is tied to the demonic. And it's tied to what you've already said, the coming great deception. Which, wouldn't it make sense that Satan would attempt to hide this stuff from the church, keep the churches from talking about it, confuse it to a way that pastors wouldn't address it, so that the words of Jesus would become true, that in those days even the very elect would be deceived, if that were possible?
Well, what's happening here is people have encounters, okay? And when you talk about abduction, people are taken. Sometimes extremely early, 4 or 5 years old, they are taken. Obviously, their parents aren't signing any type of letter of consent here. They're taken in the middle of the night, most often, although there are some daylight abductions. But most of the time, they're taken in the wee hours of the morning. They are floated through windows, ceilings, walls, windows. It doesn't matter. These entities have the ability to manipulate space-time, matter, and energy in ways that human beings do not. It's beyond our science. And while that might sound like something out of science fiction, trust me, it's not. I've spoken to people who have been abducted, and it's always the same thing. They're laying in bed for the most part, and they wake up and they find that they are paralyzed. They can't move. They can move their eyes, but they can't move their bodies. And the next thing you know, they're levitating above the floor, above the bed, and headed towards a window or a wall. At this point, usually they see the grays. The grays, I believe, are avatars that the enemy has created to allow the demons to physically inhabit them and animate them. And this stuff is the stuff of 3-hour conversations. not for what is a gray.
Right.
I think they are biologically created entities, avatars, which are automatons. They're not robotic in the sense of moving parts, but demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. Fallen angels are the angels that fell with the rebellion from Satan. The offspring of the fallen angels and the women of earth became the Nephilim. After the flood, the Nephilim were destroyed, and their spirits wandered the earth. Okay, they are the demons. Demons, in order to manifest, must inhabit something. So that's a very quick breakdown of the way this thing works. So Satan, who is a super scientist, although completely demented, needs to have the demons, which are on his side, by the way, obviously. They're in a fixed state. He has to create some sort of a biological suit so they can interface in this dimension, and that's what the grays are, in my opinion. Can I prove that? No, I can't. But that's what I think they are. And I got to this from Whitley Strieber's book, I believe it's Communion, one of them, although it may be another book outside of Communion, where Whitley has been abducted for the umpteenth time. He's aboard the ship, and he opens up like a panel or a drawer, and in it he sees the grays. The grays are there, but they're like lifeless suits. So that's my take on it. The late David Flynn and I had a discussion about this very thing probably 20 years ago now, and I had come to that part with great trepidation. It took me months to finally admit that maybe this is what's going on, because part of me didn't want to believe it. And that's the thing here. We're into some really, really strange stuff. But, the Bible's strange stuff, right?
That's exactly right, yeah.
I mean, the Bible is chock full of the supernatural, which we read and we just think, oh, that's nothing. But
well, we've turned it into a cartoon. Yeah, we've turned it into cartoon characters and to comic books and fairy tales. Yeah, and what you just said, the Nephilim, the fallen, that's all in the Bible. Every bit of that is. And so, but so many times it gets skipped over from the pulpit or explained away. And I guess the greater point that I wanted to make is as we're having this conversation for the rest of the show today, I just want people to understand that we're not necessarily talking about little green men from Mars. We're talking about beings from outside of our realm of existence. We're talking about, another dimension of reality that exists according to the Bible, that was created just like this earth and this dimension of reality was created by the Creator. And just like we choose to fall, if you will, just like we choose to turn our backs on God, some of those created beings have done that, and they are being used for evil. And apparently, according to God's Word and just according to physical reality, they have the ability to interact with us.
Well, they do, and this is what's alarming, but the church, for the most part, and I'm part of the church, so I'm not bagging on the church here, but the church, for the most part, is never touches the subject. They don't want to alarm their congregation.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a third of your congregation has had experiences, and they can't deal with the experiences, or they've never told anybody. So, that's why we made the film in their own words, and the testimonies that are in that film, I believe, are just incredibly riveting and eye-opening, and that's available by going to my website, lamarzulli.net. Look, I made the film for pastors. I mean, obviously for just everybody, but specifically I targeted pastors so they would be informed and understand what's going on and be able to deal with it. Because there's people sitting in the pews that have had experiences with that experience, and that's why we get emails almost on a daily basis from people who have had sightings, that things have happened, and I got to tell you, this thing is ramping up. This last couple of days there was an announcement by NASA, never a straight answer, about life being discovered on Mars. That was my blog today, and if people want to read that, they can go to lamarzulli.wordpress.com. But I basically said, well, when you actually read the article, they really didn't find life. They found the ingredients for life, and maybe they're on the right track. Okay, but it's not like they went up to Mars and, well, we found microbes which, are alive. Whoopee. It's nothing like that. We found a small animal running around Mars. Nothing like that. But the deal, what we're into here, is that the neo-Darwinists look at Darwinism and they say, well, yeah, evolution happened, but not the way Charlie Darwin would have imagined over 150 years ago. It's a different deal. So the neo-Darwinists are looking at the complexities of DNA. And by the way, there's a whole segment in Their Own Words, UFOs Are Real, about Darwinism and DNA and the complexity of it. If Darwinists had known, if Charlie Darwin had known about the complexity of the deoxyribonucleic double helix of life, the DNA molecular structure, which is embedded in that's the coding which is embedded in life on every single thing that's alive on this planet, as a DNA structure. It just didn't spring into being. It just didn't happen by chance. This is a very complex coding. So the neo-Darwinists believe that there's somebody created this thing, but of course it can't be God because there is no supernatural. So they're looking to the out there in the universe for the creator, our creator. And this is where the whole UFO phenomenon comes into play.
That's right.
They're already looking for this. They're ready to embrace UFOs as our creators.
That's right.
I'm not making this stuff up.
That's exactly right. L.A., listen, man, we're up against a hard break, so when we come back from this break, I look forward to continuing this conversation, going deeper into this discovery of, quote, the building blocks of life on Mars, and then also getting into your latest film, Fatima, too. And so we'll do that on the other side of this break.
Great. Sounds good, Brandon.
Absolutely. Folks, thank you for tuning in to Freedom Friday. Never a dull moment. We'll be right back. Well, folks, welcome back to Freedom Friday, and thank you once again for tuning in today. This is Brandon Gallups sitting in today, filling in for my dad, who is out doing some preaching and teaching and recording some radio and television things in a whole nother part of the country. So thank you for the honor of sitting here today. Thank you for tuning in and listening today. Thank you for your support every week, for the emails that we receive, for the shout-outs on Facebook and all the social media platforms, for the support of our YouTube channel through the PNN network, and just thank you for allowing us to be a part of your lives every Friday. And so as I get ready to bring back on my guest, my dear friend L.A. Marzulli. L.A., listen, as we went to break, you were getting into this article about this latest article from NASA, the building blocks of life found on Mars. And it's interesting because as I saw the title of that article this week and then began to read it, I started thinking back on how I would have responded to that article just several years ago. And then the different way that I look at it now after meeting you and just in all honesty, man, you opened my eyes to a lot of this. And then I'm not one to just take somebody's word. I went and started doing my own research and digging into the scriptures and started seeing, a lot of the same things that you see and some other things, some different things. And so I just, was thinking back on how I would have viewed that article very differently just 4 or 5 years ago than I do now. And it's interesting. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the quote building blocks to life are on Mars. If we believe the biblical narrative, the Genesis narrative, that this universe, everything that we see, taste, touch, and feel was created, spoken into existence, and it just makes sense that the entire universe carries in some shape, form, or fashion the quote building blocks to life. Well,
on one hand, you're absolutely right on that. I mean, we know, and I actually quoted that in the blog today, and the piece that I wrote. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. He's with God from the beginning. All things were created by Him, through Him, and without Him, nothing that was made was not made. So it's real straight ahead. There's a discrepancy. There's a gap between a wide gap, a chasm in worldviews between the Darwinian paradigm and what we as Christians believe, that Jesus spoke everything into existence. He created everything that we see. And I've been saying this recently at conferences. If we are intellectually honest, no one knows what this is and where we are in it. And what I mean by that, what is consciousness? How does it work in our bodies? Where does Brandon Gallups sit?
Yeah.
Where are you really? You're in your little biological shell just like I am. But where do you see through? As your eyes are open, you're in your studio looking at that microphone. How does all that work? And where is Brandon really? Where is L.A. Marzulli really? Where are the people that are listening to this show? you know, memories. If I say, who did you take to your senior high school prom? Everybody knows it. How does memory work? How is it that you're not groping for that? It's just bam, and there she or he is. It's like right there, right at your fingertips. How does that work? And of course, no one really knows. You know, the reductionism and the synapses in the brain and all this, but no one really knows how it works. No one really knows if the United States is analogous to the universe. Are we in Tampa, Duluth, Walla Walla? Nobody knows. Nobody knows where we are or what this is. Enter the supernatural. Enter the demonic. Enter the idea of Genesis 3:15, that the seed of the serpent will be at enmity with the seed of the woman. Enter the coming great deception. Enter the ongoing, burgeoning UFO phenomenon with all of its subparts like cattle mutilations, the abductions, the implants, the breeding program. It's all there. And it's taboo in many Christian circles. And yet, every Friday, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, I think it's like 10 years running or whatever it is, continues to promulgate the idea that we were visited in antiquity by ancient astronauts.
That's right.
And the church is numb.
Yeah.
The church is like so far behind. We've got the answers. We should be the tip of the spear. And that's why I'm constantly talking about it, harping about it, writing books, producing DVDs. Our new DVD, Fatima 2, Strange Phenomena. What happened there over 100 years ago now, specifically in regard to the miracle of the sun, is not what people think it is.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm so concerned about it, Fatima set a precedent for the 20th century into the 21st century, that sun miracles are somehow from God, that entities who appear that only a certain group of people can see must be Mary of the Bible. And having delved into this for well over a decade now, but we went to Portugal. We spent 2 weeks there interviewing a lot of experts, and we created 2 films out of this. And what we discovered was a completely different narrative than what most people think it is.
Yes.
And I realized the moment I start talking about this, it can be a sacred cow to people. I'll tell you right now, we take Mary off the table.
Yeah.
We never disparage Mary in any way. People can believe what they want to believe. What we're saying is that we delved into the 1917 original handwritten records, and what we discovered was a completely different Fatima than what most people have grown up with. And for those of your audience who don't know what I'm talking about, in 1917, there was a series of apparitions over 6 months from May to October, and the crowds began to swell. They were seen by 3 illiterate peasants, Lucia, who was 10, Francisco 9, Jacinta 7. When I say illiterate, they couldn't read or write, and there was no schooling. And these were peasants tending sheep. And this entity appeared to the 3 kids and said she was from the sky. She never called herself Mary, ever. That all comes later. And she said she was from the sky, and she gave the children something to eat and drink. Lucia and all 3 of them ate, but only Lucia and Jacinta, the 2 girls, drank. So all 3 kids could see her, but only Lucia and Jacinta could hear what the entity was saying. Francisco never heard the messages or never heard the communications. So this became widely known in the area, and the crowds began to swell. And the magistrates, I'm giving you the shorthand, Reader's Digest, Cliff Notes version. The bottom line is the magistrates, the priests, and the clergy and everyone else said, look, go back and ask this entity, we need a sign. So they did. They went back and asked the entity for a sign, and the entity said, this was in September, that the following month, in October, there would be a sign. The word died out. Upwards of 70,000 people gathered in the fields at Fatima, and something happened.
That's right.
It had been raining all day. The clouds parted. The sun was there, and then another cloud moved in front of the sun, and out of that cloud came an object. And we've got handwritten testimonies from the witnesses who looked up and saw a dull silver disc dancing over the crowd. Well, what the heck is that? It wasn't the sun.
Yeah.
It was not the sun that left this place in the atmosphere. It was a silver disc. It was a ufological event, a UFO, which appeared over the crowd. And interesting enough, when you go back into the ancient goddess worship, which was permeated all of Portugal and much of Europe, some of these female entities that appeared thousands of years before the Christian era, get this, had the ability to make the sun spin, to spin the sun. So Fatima was dressed up in Catholic clothes, with all due respect to Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
The entity was called Mary, and the miracle of the sun has now become widely accepted. And as I show in my presentations and I show in the film, it's happening in modernity.
Yeah.
It's happening last year in Knock, Ireland in 2017. That's why I made this film.
Yeah.
Because it's alarming, in my opinion.
Well, and it's interesting, you know, the miracle of the sun, these anomalies to do with the sun and to do with light. Now, we understand that God is light, and that was the first thing spoken into existence from the biblical narrative, and science tells us why that would have to be. But the Bible also tells us that Satan, the imposter, will masquerade as an angel of light. So wouldn't it make sense then that what you're describing, these events, not only in history but that are still going on today, would be a deception from the enemy to be appearing to manipulate the very creation of God?
Well, in my opinion, Brandon, that's exactly what's going on, and that's why I made the film. And I think we've had critics that have, you're just Catholic bashing and blah, 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 blah. And I write them back and said, have you seen the film? And they write back and they say no. They haven't seen the film. So how can they possibly weigh in on the film if they've never seen it? Fatima 2, Strange Phenomena, picks up where Fatima 1 leaves off. Look, cars that were there didn't start. Windshields exploded. Gasoline spontaneously combusted. People had skin burns on them after this object flew over them. Clothes dried automatically. All of this, everything I just said, is analogous to modern-day UFO sightings. I'm not making this stuff up.
Yeah.
And, again, what's alarming to me is that people accept it as something benevolent. And it's not. It's part of the coming great deception.
That's right.
And the fact that eyewitness accounts who were standing in that field stated they looked up and saw a dull silver disc. One guy kept going, L.A., it has to be Mary, and all this was good. How can you? He was really livid. And I said, are you aware that a group of psychics in 2 different locations got together and through the occult technique of automatic writing talked about this, that something wondrous would happen in May 13th, and it was signed Stella Matutina, the bright morning star, which is another name for Lucifer.
Yes,
now,
it is.
Around in the 4th century, the Catholic Church took this and reassigned it to Mary. So, but that's not what the Bible. That's why sola scriptura. That's not what the biblical account says. That name was reserved for Lucifer, the bright morning star, and that automatic writing, it was done by the psychics, was signed right to left. You could only see it by holding the paper up in a mirror. So the writing's right to left. You can only decipher it by holding the paper up to a mirror. Then it goes left to right. But it was signed left to right, normal handwriting, Stella Matutina, the bright morning star. The 2 groups of psychics published this in O Século, the Portuguese newspaper, the Century. That's what the newspaper is called. And it said something wondrous is going to happen on May 13th. So I wrote this guy back and said, how do you get around that? How do you get around the fact that psychics, which are employing occult techniques, are signaling this out a priori before it ever happens? How can you possibly reconcile that? And the thing is signed Stella Matutina, the bright morning star. So again, when you really delve in, when you dive in, when you begin to unpack what happened at Fatima, in my opinion, it was a harbinger of deception, which is what the first film is called. Fatima 1 is Miracle of a Sun, or a harbinger of deception, and Fatima 2, of course, is Strange Phenomena. And you put the 2 together, and it's alarming. And especially that clip at the end, Brandon, I know you've seen it, the compilation of sun miracles and apparitions, which are happening all over the globe.
It's astounding. It's absolutely astounding.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think we would be remiss to not say this. And I just looked. I remembered this article and probably have talked about it with you. But from February 28th of 2017, Fox News, UFO sightings hit an all-time high. and I don't have the article open. I'm just reading the headline. But the vast majority of those sightings happened in the United States as well, which is also interesting. So, L.A., listen, we're going to do this, man. We're going to take our last break, and then we're going to come back with our last segment of the show. And in that last segment, man, let's jump into what we mean by the Great Deception and why, in our opinion, is this happening now? Because I believe there's a very specific reason. So, folks, thank you again for tuning in to Freedom Friday. Thank you for being a part of this show, and we'll come back right after these messages. Well, that's right, folks. Welcome back. And, man, the time has flown by today, but thank you so much for being a part of Freedom Friday today. And a huge thank you to my dad for allowing me, Brandon Gallups, to fill in for him today as he is out handling some things as a part of his ministry. And what an honor to be here today. And as I bring back L.A. Marzulli, L.A., listen, you and I have both dropped the term several times today. It's a part of the coming deception or the Great Deception. And I just want to read this out of Matthew 24:24. It's the words of Jesus. Says this. It says, "For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect." And I've pointed out many times in my preaching and teaching that 3 times in Matthew 24, Jesus points us to deception in the end times. And then this final time, he talks about the deception being so great that if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. So who is the elect? Well, that's us. That's the church. That's those people. That's those of us that have been bought by the blood, that have accepted Jesus as Savior. That the deception is going to be so great that even we will question things that are going on in the last days. And so this deception has to be something on a worldwide scale. It has to be something so magnificent, so scary, if you will, that everybody is going to be caught up in this. And I just can't imagine a greater way than for a, quote, alien visitation or something of that sort to be perpetrated upon the planet, and for a leader to rise up, that comes out of that. Oh, listen, I can communicate with these people. I can stop them from destroying the planet. Thus the Antichrist walks onto the scene. I mean, I can just see this playing out. And then as we went to break, I quoted the article from Fox News, UFO sightings at an all-time high. Your film, sun miracles, as they're being called, these weird phenomenons of the sun and light and appearings, apparitions of people, demonic visitations, abduction reports. I deal with it in my ministry every single day, people talking about these types of things. And I believe there's a reason that this is happening now.
And the reason it's happening now is because we are in the last of the last days. And I realize that, people hear this and they go, well, not really. Yeah, we are. And things are heating up. Look, if it wasn't the UFO phenomenon, I'd be looking for something else. Trust me.
That's right.
If it wasn't, I'd be looking for, okay, where's the coming Great Deception? And the coming Great Deception, the springboard for it is the Darwinian paradigm. I mean, that's the springboard which pushes the envelope away from the Christian worldview into this other worldview, which, of course, is the Darwinian worldview. And what the church needs to understand is, we can jump around all day long and talk about the book of John and the fact that, in our opinion, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, the Darwinists don't believe that. And the world doesn't run on the Christian worldview. The world runs on Darwinism. You go down to Peru or any museum anywhere, and you see the Darwinian paradigm openly displayed. That's what it is. And the Darwinian paradigm is the springboard to the acceptance of the extraterrestrial, because that's what the neo-Darwinists are looking for.
Yes,
they're waiting for their creators to show up, because they realize that DNA just didn't spring into existence.
Yes.
Someone created it, but the creator can't possibly be God. So this is, look, I keep banging the drum, waving the flag, whatever analogy you want to use. I mean, I'm obviously very passionate about it. And the problem is that disclosure happened in December of 2017, and the church slept through it, as most people slept through it. And what happened was this guy, Fravor, an F-18 pilot, Commander Fravor, gets on Fox News with Tucker Carlson. They show the footage, and it's a UFO. And Tucker Carlson's interviewing Fravor, and Fravor says, look, this thing moved well above supersonic speed. It was not show the film, and it begs the question: how does someone like Commander Fravor, who doesn't have a book, isn't or a DVD, is basically a nobody? And I say that not in a disparaging way, but he doesn't have a footprint on the internet or anything else. He's not even a player, for crying out loud. How does he wind up on Fox News? 1, 2. How did they come up with what was then classified footage and show that on Fox News?
Yeah,
it's a managed agenda.
That's right.
That was disclosure, and disclosure has been ongoing. In fact, other news outlets have recycled the Commander Fravor interview, and it's being repeated again. So they haven't really come out with anything new, although last 2 days ago, NASA announces, life on Mars. Well, not so fast, citizen. But this is what we're up against, and it is becoming great deception, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the church needs to wake up and understand that this is a signal that the return of the King, our Lord and Savior, has to be coming soon. Has to be soon. Not a date setter. Don't know when. But that's why we keep watching, like they say at Prophecy Watchers. We keep watching. Jesus admonishes us to watch and be ready. Folks, watch and be ready.
That's exactly right. Watch and be ready. What a great word, L.A. And, as we move closer to the end times, and again, I'm with you, brother. I'm not a date setter. Don't know exactly when Jesus is coming back. I know he told us to watch for a return to Israel, and it's there. So here we are, and like you started the program saying, 150 years ago, that was explained away in commentaries, brother, as, that's spiritual, that it doesn't mean physical. We don't know what it means, but there's no way it's going to be physical. Well, it is. And here we are, the same way that Genesis 6 is explained away in so many commentaries. And so here we are, and I just encourage people to pay attention to what's going on. Listen, I encourage people, if you have experiences like this, if there are things going on in your world that you can't explain, that you need some help dealing with, reach out to L.A. Marzulli. Reach out to us at ppsimmons, ppsimmons@live.com. And L.A., listen, man, we are up against the wall, brother, but you've got the last 20 seconds. Man, tell people how to find you and how they can get in touch with you.
Check it out. Go to lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net, or the Watchman, singular, watchmanchronicles.com. Get armed, get prepared, get the DVDs. You can also go to Vimeo, L.A. Marzulli, and rent some of them there. Brandon, thanks so much for having me on, and we'll see you at Hear the Watchman Conference in August.
Thank you, L.A. Appreciate it, brother. Love you. And folks, be alert, pay attention. The deception is coming. But if we are covered by the blood, then we cannot be deceived. Until next Friday, y'all have a great week.
American Survival Wholesale is proud to sponsor this ministry and their efforts to shed light on the issues that face our nation. As a veteran and Christian-owned and operated company, we support the freedom to express these Christian principles. We all understand the importance of being prepared. After witnessing the devastation of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and the wildfires that affected so many, please support this ministry by clicking on the link below and check out the amazing alt media package for our listeners. Plus, if you use the promo code PNN Radio, that's PNN Radio, you will receive free shipping, a savings of up to $200. Just click on the link below, but please do it today. Your support means so much to this channel.
The Satanists wanted to install their own tribute, a pagan idol, on the Capitol grounds, right next to the Ten Commandments.
Billions around the planet are witnessing a world in the grasp of sadistic spiritual darkness. This unholy alliance has infected our governments, our religious institutions, and our societies. The world appears to be unraveling. But can the evil behind these dark supernatural forces be defeated? Is everything playing out just as the Bible predicted it will in the final days? At last, you can know the answers to mankind's most urgent questions and learn your destiny among today's events in the new, unprecedented work taking the prophecy world by storm. Gods and Thrones, Nakash, Forgotten Prophecy and the Return of the Elohim by best-selling author, former decorated law enforcement officer, and senior pastor Carl Gallups. This changes everything. Available now wherever fine books are sold.